Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Hi, everyone. This is Michael Rochelle from Brandon Hall Group, Chief Strategy Officer, coming back to you again with another Excellence at Work podcast. I've got with me Jill Stefaniak, who is the Chief People Officer. And what I like about her is she is actually on the provider side. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your role in the company that you work at, Jill.
So as the Chief Learning Officer at Litmos, I work with our organization's leadership on trying to optimize the way we approach learning design throughout not just our workplace learning, but also in the products that we're providing our customers. So really working to ensure that all of our learning solutions and strategies are grounded in sound instructional design and learning sciences.
So interesting times, right? What we're facing inside organizations and surely the organizations that you help. And we were kind of going back and forth. We've had multiple chances to interact with one another. We kind of landed together on a few questions that we think the audience would like to hear some answers around. And I just want to kind of throw out the topics. The first one is knowledge transfer and diverse workforce. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Measuring learning impact. Everybody top of mind. And then what I like the most, the one that we'll get to last, is balancing innovation and practicality in learning programs. That is very intriguing topic that you wanted to address. So let's do first things first. So when we talk about knowledge transfer in a diverse workforce, the question I have for you is, how do you ensure effective knowledge transfer across a diverse workforce with varying levels of experience and skill sets? It's a big question, isn't it?
Yes, and it's a difficult one because especially when we're looking at so much diversity, it's really making sure that we're putting forth a concerted effort in terms of providing each of our employees or individual learners with content that they need to be most successful within their respective roles. So where I see a lot of this taking place is looking more at leveraging mentoring programs and looking at different ways we can support employee development, leadership development, providing opportunities for cross-functional learning, cross-functional training, and being able to bring people together in these different respective roles if they're going to be working in teams, having them participate in training together and really being able to engage in some conversations and problem solving about how they might be able to apply the new information that they're learning when they go back to their respective jobs. I think some of the most frustrating things we've all been through is when we've gone through mandatory training and we go, I'm not going to be able to use any of this, or I don't have the resources, or I'm also working with these other functions within my organization. And so I think taking a more proactive approach to how we can embrace cross-functional training. I also think allowing some time for folks to digest the information that they learn, especially when we're looking at ways that we can, whenever we're engaged in knowledge transfer, those are changes in behaviors. And some behaviors are more easy to change than others, depending on the impact and depending on the resources that are needed or how significant and drastic those changes may be. And so just even providing our learners with that opportunity to just kind of sit for a little bit and settle with that new information and being able to take some time to digest it and think about what are the ways we're going to be able to embrace some of these new changes or enact change within our organization. And then again, doing that in that cross-functional manner, I think is also really important as well.
The challenging part, just to kind of drill in a little bit further, there's two elements to it, right? So diverse also means all over the place. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the spectrum of skills and competencies based on what people already know or don't know, but just surely being able to get to everybody and making it happen based on how they like to learn, the conditions that they're trying to learn, how quickly we need them to learn. Like, can you put the word effective in the same sentence as diverse workforce when you have all of those elements and come out on top and say, I was able to overcome all of that and everyone knows what they need to know in the time period that they need to know? Like, what are some of the core things that people need to think about in order to get this knowledge transfer to be efficient and effective at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, because I was going to say, let's throw another word in and we'll throw efficiency in there too, just to make it even more challenging for us. But I think this is where I see a lot of opportunities, especially when we're looking at where we're at right now today in terms of personalized learning and adaptive learning. I think we're seeing opportunities where AI is going to allow us to improve upon some of those efficiencies. But this is where I think being able to customize training, this is where our organizational leaders need to look at what types of training can be generalized for all of our employees, regardless of their geographical locations, regardless of their experiences, their expertise, and their roles. But then also looking at where are those areas where we need to invest a little bit more time in terms of being able to customize that training so that it's specific to enhancing their career development, their skill sets. So I think as we're starting to look at knowledge transfer and moving forward, I think we're going to continue to see more cutting edge techniques being done in terms of upskilling. I think we're going to see different ways that technology is going to be leveraged to enhance and improve some of those efficiencies with it. But I think it's going to take some time. I still think we're relatively in that infancy phase of where we're at with being able to leverage technology to do all of this. But I definitely think that it's we're at the forefront, and I think people are paying close attention to it.
How much of a role, just riffing on this on one more issue, you're a tech provider, but you're also a content provider as well. Like, what's the marriage now? So I've got this diverse workforce that needs to have like perfectly smooth, streamlined knowledge transfer. I think I've got the technological piece, maybe not solved, but then there's this whole wave of the content issue behind it because that's going to be hyper personalized. So even if you give someone a good gateway to get to it, now it's going to be like that diversity actually has to have its own attributes in the content itself, right? Just in time, just for me, just the way I want it. Like, can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it's looking at what types of technological solutions can we provide our clients. So, for instance, if I'm thinking about Litmos, I'm thinking about our content authoring tool. And so this is where we do provide certain content, but we also have that opportunity for our customers to be able to import their own content, be able to customize certain things. Perhaps it's different refreshers, it's creating micro learnings. Having a platform that allows for you to be able to bring in a variety of different types of learning resources and assets. I think that that's also really important because, again, different learning outcomes warrant different instructional strategies. And so I think where a good technological platform is going to be able to house all of those different options for customers so that when their leadership is looking at what types of training is needed for their employees, they have the ability to house all of that within that learning platform. But again, they've got that flexibility that they need to make sure that, this particular resource is going to be most beneficial in this particular instance.
So let's kind of knit it all together, right? So we've set the stage. So we've kind of maybe have a recipe of doing it the right way as far as that knowledge transfer. We know there's a content piece. We know there's a tech piece. We know that we have to deal with efficiency and effectiveness. But in the end, it's got to be impactful, right? So we kind of get to that second part, right? Which is measurable impact on doing all of this. I mean, for most of the folks that are in the audience, this is probably their biggest struggle, right? They're probably listening to you saying, we try very hard to do everything that you just said. We think we're trying to do however, I think they're lacking in being able to prove it through a business metric point of view, through an ROI of learning point of view. And I think one of the areas that you brought up in our discussion and prepping for this, you say a big chunk of it is a KPI issue as well, like what to measure, how often to measure, and is that linked to performance? How do you make, for the audience, how do you transfer your learning measurement model from course completions, hours of training delivered, certifications, grades. How do you move it into, because of this learning, because we taught people these skills, that we're able to do this, this, and this for the business? Like, how do you make that transition?
I think it's challenging. It's I think one of the reasons why organizations encounter so many challenges with being able to demonstrate that ROI is because it's really hard to isolate a lot
Mm-hmm.
of different functions within our organizations. However, the other challenge that we have with a lot of the metrics that are currently used by most organizations when we're reporting on learning and development initiatives, it's usually just kind of, as you've said, it's those course completion rates, it's what's the assessment scores perhaps at the end of that summative assessment, or those knowledge checks that were embedded in that particular learning module, where we kind of struggle. And it kind of goes back to this idea of knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer takes time. And so how do we know that there's been sustainable change in behavior, or sustainable change in and improved performance? Most L&D professionals will tell you they have a hard time being able to track that and being able to follow up with all of their learners, or to follow up with managers and supervisors to really be able to pinpoint and say, because of this training, we've seen this. Where I do see a lot of opportunities, where I think we're going to start to be able to see even greater improvements with that, is through personalized learning. So as we're starting to look at personalized learning, particularly in e-learning platforms, as we're seeing more organizations being able to leverage technology such as AI to be able to identify when a learner perhaps may be struggling with a particular concept, being able to send out those reminders or refreshers, being able to kind of absolutely be able to pinpoint and target where they might have struggled within a learning module, and be able to follow up and reiterate on certain concepts. That also gives your L&D professionals and your HR professionals more data to look at and go, where are a lot of people struggling? Are there where should we be focusing in our future training initiatives to make sure that we're addressing some of these challenges our employees and our learners are experiencing? And so I think with that, we're going to be able to see more longitudinal data to be able to see how many of them are participating in these refreshers, how many of them are improving their scores after completing certain refresher courses. That's going to also show an employee's dedication to mastering a new skill or being able to apply that. And then, of course, coupled with just that change, and perhaps having more ongoing feedback with between the employee and their supervisor. So not just waiting for the end of the, that annual review where you're scrambling and you're writing what your goals are, and that different goals or measures get thrown at you throughout the year as new priorities come up. But being able to have that ongoing feedback, and I think with the advances that I think we're going to continue to see with personalized learning, this will allow managers and supervisors and their employees to have more of that back and forth. I think there's going to be more feedback and dialogue to support those initiatives. And I think all of that is great data for L&D professionals to be able to tell that story with how are we improving learning and how are we improving performance. And so I think we're going to continue to see more analytics being pulled on an individual learner's trajectory through workplace training and performance.
Being a chief learning officer, can you give the audience like one tip or trick that is a question I get asked about a lot, which is learning and development teams will often say, I'm not in the room when the business metrics are set. So those business metrics get set. We're going to grow by X amount. We're going to launch new products by this date. We're going to improve our NPS or CSAT. All that's getting set. The table's getting set. I'm not in that room. How do I take everything I'm about to do and connect it to all that? Because the middle part is what role talent plays. And this is the chief problem with, I hear from a lot of learning and development teams saying, how do I set mindful KPIs that are connected to the business when I'm not involved in setting those business metrics?
I'm gonna sneak in and offer two tips. So number one, I think your L&D team should definitely be working hand in hand with your talent development team. I think if they're working and operating in silos, that can become problematic and challenging. So I definitely think working together is really helpful. One one suggestion I would have for L&D professionals is that when you get these different business metrics that are being set for the next for the next fiscal year, or perhaps for the next couple of years as they're working on certain goals for their strategic plans, I think asking them, what is today's current performance? What are some of the challenges we're facing today? So if we were, we're setting these performance metrics, if we were to evaluate them today, what would you tell me is our current state of affairs, our current state of performance? And that can kind of give L&D professionals some indicators in terms of what types of training they might want to focus on developing for their employees to meet those goals. But I think that also has to go hand in hand with what your talent development team is doing to make sure, what are their initiatives, what goals are they pushing within the organization? Because I think a lot of times you can do a lot of things in synergy together, but it's making sure that you're taking that concerted effort. But I think just being able to pick one of those performance metrics or performance goals and say, well, where are we at today? What's lacking today? And then from there, we can kind of go and look at what types of training do we currently have in place? Maybe we have stuff already and it's just a matter of enhancing it or improving it, or looking at what types of feedback have we been given on the things that we're currently doing. Sometimes it might be that there's just a complete void and going, okay, now we know what we're going to focus our efforts on moving forward.
I love that. I love the fact that you're not saying you got to figure out how to pick the lock on the conference room door to get into the business meeting. You're saying, let's team up with other members of the HR team. Let's get talent and learning together to say, we'll make it happen through what do people need to learn. And let's make sure we're aligned on that. And I love the fact, too, that you brought up that can't wait for a performance review to figure it out, how it all happened. Got to build in that coaching and feedback along the way. I love that because that's something tangible. I can go to my colleagues in HR a lot faster than they can getting into that business meeting. So the time that we have left, I can't wait to talk about this topic. I love this. Balancing innovation and practicality in learning programs. At face value, it sounds impossible, right? Innovation and practicality at the same time. How do you do that?
I think scaling your efforts. I think scalability is key. But I also think it keeps going back to that fundamental question: what is it that we're trying to improve? Right now, there's, I think a lot of L&D professionals may feel like a kid in a candy store with all the different technologies that are out there, but it can also be very overwhelming to think about. There's so many different ways in which we can lead different L&D initiatives. So I think it's really looking and going, what is it that we're trying to do? And then going from to the next decision, which is what different technological solutions are going to help us meet, our intended outcome. And so that's where I think scalability is really important to also look at, especially when we're looking at different technologies, cost different amounts of money, or depending on the size of our organizations, really looking at, testing out some of these new things, being able to do some pilot programs, I think is okay as well, to say, is this a good fit for our organization? Does this align with our current learning culture? And being able to kind of have some of those, gather some of that feedback and data too along the ways, rather than, adopting something and implementing it without really knowing how it's going to be received.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, crucial point that you brought up. I want to reinforce it for the audience, is that we naturally gravitate towards, if we're doing something at scale, then we think it has to be sustainable, consistent, and reproducible, which means it has to be one size fits all, because I can't entertain innovation and creativity. I can't entertain iterations. But the way you just described it, you can, because you can get out there in an agile format and try things out and figure out what works under what circumstances. So you can be creative, you can be innovative, but you have to be practical. Now I see how the two come together is in the execution of that innovation with the pilot idea. That's a great example of, I want to be innovative and creative, but I have to be practical. Don't want to just roll something out across the organization, have it fail, or not have anyone know what I'm doing. That's a great example of balancing the two. Another thought on that I wanted to ask you that struck me when you were saying this is, how much of this has to be done exclusively by the learning and development team? Is everything that we're talking about in terms of balancing innovation and practicality for learning programs 100% owned by the learning department, or can other people help?
I don't think it should be owned by the learning department, especially if we're trying to be promoting whenever I hear an organization saying they want to promote, lifelong learning, or they want to have this, they're a learning organization. If you're going to start to make claims that you're a learning organization, everyone needs to have an active role, and an active investment in that, especially when we're looking at things like knowledge transfer and return on investment. And so when I think about things too, like scalability, L&D is usually struggling with budgets, right? And trying to convince organizational leadership that they need to be able to expand upon their budget for different L&D initiatives. And so when that happens, I think being able to pilot something and show some initial results can also get buy-in from your senior leadership teams, so that you can go bigger in the future with that next iteration. Again, also being able to justify that return on investment. But I think as we're looking at that knowledge transfer, that's where we need to make sure it's not just L&D developing training experiences that the employees participate in and then being done with it. It's the managers and supervisors taking a more active role and having conversations with their employees and their teams about, what have you learned? What can we implement right now? What types of infrastructure do we need to be supportive in implementing some of these changes? And that's where everyone starts taking that more active role. And that's where you see a true learning organization taking shape. It's looking at what happens after training. I think what happens after training in that transfer environment is most important. And that's sometimes the one that we experience a lot of challenges with too, because we attend trainings and we come back to work and there's a lot of competing interests. And so it's finding ways that we can keep revisiting that training and keep revisiting those newly acquired skills and look at what's the best way we can optimize those and put those into performance immediately.
That's terrific, because that gets right back, because you triggered me when you said culture. And it's great because learning development is not in charge of culture. They can only do so much. They need a soft landing within the organization, and it takes a village, as they say, to raise an employee. Okay, it wouldn't be an October 2024 podcast if we didn't bring up AI. So let's close out on that idea. Like, where do you see AI playing in this kind of balance of practicality and innovation? Where do you think this, and most importantly, where do you think the safe play is for L&D right now?
I think we're still very much in that with all the advances that we've seen already with AI, particularly in workplace learning. I still think we're in the infancy phase of things. I'm very excited seeing all of the new advances that are taking place. Some of my predictions, I think we're going to see how AI is going to be able to enhance and improve some of our L&D strategies. So I think that we're going to see ways where some of our different L&D tasks that we typically engage in may be improved upon. We might be able to expedite certain things. I don't think AI is going to replace L&D altogether, but I think we're going to see where we're going to be able to create training more quickly, or perhaps improve certain things in terms of creating these training outlines and assessments, which is really exciting. I think we're going to be able to see that personalized learning and adaptive learning just take off to a whole new level, particularly with how AI will be able to help with making suggestions and pushing out different content to our learners, and then along with having those particular analytics to be able to track their performance. But then also, I think we're going to continue to see, I'm going to predict that we're going to see an increase in learner demand. I don't think our learners are necessarily asking for AI developed content. At the end of the day, they want content that's good and that's useful. And so I think we're going to hear more from our learning audiences, whereas personalized learning continues to grow. That's going to become an expectation. It's not going to become a nice to have. It's going to become an expectation in workplace learning. And so that's where I think our L&D professionals are really going to have an important role in this, and looking at, is the content that we're developing, how are we customizing it to meet our learners' needs? This is where I think we're going to start seeing some changes just in terms of how we approach training and development.
Jill Stefaniak, Chief Learning Officer at Litmos, thank you. We could talk about this all day. I love your passion and your commitment to the space. I took away a lot from listening to this, and I'm sure everyone that's going to watch this podcast will as well. I thank you for your time. Again, this is Michael Rochelle from the Brandon Hall Group signing off. Look forward to another exciting update from Jill and the team as we all continue on, which hopefully after this, a little bit easier, a little bit more understandable journey. So thank you.